Hello, I'm Adam,
And I'm Adrian.
and welcome to Cast from the Crypt. Today we are looking back at the good days of
Mm,
M. Night Shyamalan. For the
mm.
first time this past week, I've watched 2002's Signs, per your recommendation.
I'm shocked it was your first time.
I am too. Yeah, I really like a good alien abduction movie too.
Me
They're always
too.
so hokey and cheesy. And this one is corny, sure, but it is a great example of like this is what an alien abduction movie could be.
Yeah.
It's good. I love it. I'm getting into it like right my thoughts right away, but I thought it was so refreshing that in this movie, oh man, I'm getting really ahead of myself. The movie's about this small family, a man, his brother, and his children. They live in the country on a farm with a field of corn, and one day they wake up and there are crop circles that are too perfect to be made by human hands. And they think it's a prank at first, but as time goes on, it's pointing out to be that actually it is aliens. Part of the reason they come to the conclusion that it is aliens is because throughout the world, there are more and more alien sightings. So
Hmm.
not only are they slowly being convinced that there are aliens amongst them, the entire world is. And by the end of the movie, when they're like, man, there's aliens here on our farm, we have to defend ourselves, you see news reports about how aliens are actively being spotted attacking people all over the world, like in Israel, I think, in Florida, like anywhere in the world. And I think it's interesting that it is this small scale abduction, but it's actually happening to everybody and not just this family. And we're only seeing it from the perspective of this family.
Yeah. This is something that M. Night Shyamalan does well. Well, has done well, I should say. He hasn't done it well every single time. But he will often present to you a small scale story as you described, and then open up the world and show you the larger effects. Examples include The Village. Examples include this film, his newest film, which I won't spoil or anything. We could talk about that sometime. But this is a thing he does from time to time. And it's also proven detrimental to some of his movies. The Happening comes to mind. But watching this, over 20 years old, from the heyday, really, of his career, it is, it just makes me feel good to see that there was a time when he was making some really solid pictures. And I think my favorite thing about this movie is the story surrounding this family and the performances here of these family members. This movie, in my opinion, has some of the best child acting I've ever seen. I don't think that's an extreme claim. I think
I
the
think I could
kids
agree with that, yeah.
are good. Abigail Breslin is adorable in this film. She was very, very young. I don't know exactly how old, but maybe five, six, maybe even younger. And then, of course, Rory Culkin, the sleeper hit of the Culkin brothers, uh, is in this one too. And I think he's really strong in this movie. We also get a very young Joaquin Phoenix. And though it's not his most involved role, I really like him and Mel Gibson on screen together. I really, really do. I thought they did a really good job together, and he plays kind of the perfect younger, goofier brother to Mel Gibson's very mature, stoic, traumatized priest character. Graham, how good is Mel Gibson in this movie?
Dude, he's ridiculous. He's ridiculous. For all the, and then like, he's in general a ludicrous, ridiculous, lunatic, crazy person. Yet here we are watching him bring it all together to give such a compelling performance. Like this is a
Oh my
character
god,
you are with 100% of the
yeah.
time and rooting for. And you just get more and more depth into his mind, into his like emotional state, and it just feels more and more like you can relate to him, and it's more realistic, and you like him. Like Mel Gibson's so unlikable as a person, even like in this era, even in like the early 2000s. That's when he was really starting to fall off the ship. But all that being said, like this character is so likable.
Yeah, he really is. And that's to M. Night Shyamalan's credit. I mean, he really wrote a great character in Graham Hess. The movie shows us this family, right? And of course, the aliens are the larger picture. That's what's going on. But previously, the moment before in this film, is this family has just gone through an incredibly traumatic and out of nowhere loss. They've lost the mother, the matriarch of this family. So Graham has lost his wife. These two young children have lost their mother. She was killed in a tragic accident, a car accident. And we get little glimpses into that situation, but you get the sense early on that Mel Gibson's character is deeply, deeply broken. As I said before, he is a Episcopalian priest, and we get several moments in the beginning of the movie through various characters in this small town. They call him Father, and he tells them, "Don't call me that anymore. Don't call me that anymore. It's just Graham now. It's just Mr. Hess now." And he quit. He left the cloth behind and has left the priesthood. But we find out through this really, really great script and through Mel Gibson's really solid performance that he hasn't just left the cloth behind. He no longer believes in God. He has been filled with profound doubt because he has lost his wife. All that paired with this very nihilistic, very dark and depressing situation of an alien invasion, the immense hopelessness that comes with that. If a thing can come to Earth and invade, if it's got the technology to do that, then we are truly screwed, right? It creates a very melancholy movie. And him, Graham, trying to keep it together for his younger brother, who's also really down on his luck, and we get some really great glimpses into that character too. But also for his two young children who have not just lost a mother, but are losing their father, maybe not physically, but certainly losing him mentally as a strong father figure. It's just great, man. It's just great. And damn, it makes me kind of sad talking about it because M. Night Shyamalan's career really freaking fell off after this movie. And I like to laugh at M. Night Shyamalan sometimes. The movie Old, one of the worst movies I've ever seen, probably you too. But it also fills me with deep sadness because I don't know what happened. It's part of the reason why I was so relieved that he made a decent movie in A Knock at the Cabin. And so it just felt right to ask you to watch this one with me. I'm really glad to hear that you enjoyed it. There's so many good things happening in it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like you said, the center of the story is not the aliens, it's this family, it's these characters. All the development and writing goes into these characters, and that is, in a way, a flex. It's demonstrative of how much skill M. Night Shyamalan has and how he can successfully write good characters. And that's probably the hardest part about any story, is getting the characters good, getting the characters right. And here he, not only does he do that, but he writes characters in a way that seems to pair with the actors really well. Like Rory Culkin, like you said, it's one of the best child performances you and probably I have ever seen. But it feels like he was given what he could do, you know? Like he showed off what he could do. He acted his little heart out. But he was also given the role to do that, you know? He was given just that much. It's ambitious. Like, that's an ambitious amount of emotion to be asking from a child. But he was able to do it. You know, the casting's pretty perfect. Mel Gibson really is making me feel sorry for this broken priest. I also like the subversive nature of the story. Like, okay, it's pretty basic alien abduction, crop circles, green men, what have you, but also at the heart of this otherwise science fiction premise is this man's struggle with his spirituality. You know, the most anti-unreligious thing that could happen is aliens coming. You know, they really don't go together that well, and this movie pulls it off. Prometheus is another movie I'll say is a sci-fi about aliens that has this spiritual undertone, but Prometheus doesn't do it well like this movie. I don't think
Yeah,
this movie kind of justifies the reason to have belief or to have faith or to find faith. It gives these characters a reason to find faith. That I don't think Prometheus does very well. I think just the character is religious. And yeah, it's a great movie. I'm so glad I watched it with you.
like I said earlier, I'm shocked you hadn't seen it yet. I watched it growing up, maybe a couple of times. I know that I rented it from Blockbuster as a kid with my parents, and they're not into the whole sci-fi thing. There's a lot of interesting stuff about this movie, namely that it could have been very, very different. Shyamalan had considered for the role of Graham various different actors. He actually wanted Graham to be much older than Mel Gibson actually was. Because I'd say Mel Gibson was maybe mid 40s here, and he had considered Paul Newman first, and Paul Newman had said no. And then he also considered Clint Eastwood for the role, and Clint Eastwood said no.
I could not
And then
imagine.
I know. And then for Graham's brother, Merrill, instead of Joaquin Phoenix, he had been considering Mark Ruffalo and a couple of other actors, and all of that fell through too. And Joaquin Phoenix was a backup of a backup, basically. And in my view, that's just an example of like the stars aligning and giving kind of the perfect cast for this movie. It's a very early example of like a good Joaquin Phoenix performance. I know now he's understood to be probably one of the best working actors there are. He was not that then. Just kind of like a weirdo in Hollywood, and still is a weirdo, but a talented one. But I love his arc. You know, he is a struggling former minor league baseball player. He's living, of course, with his brother, sleeping on the couch. He's a dedicated uncle, but he's just kind of a loser and doesn't have a lot going on in his life. His former glory is that he hit a lot of home runs in the minor leagues. He had a record, but he also had the record for the most strikeouts in the minor leagues. And that duality, right? The fact that he can be one thing, an incredibly gifted hitter, or I guess an incredibly gifted hitter of home runs specifically, but also a terrible hitter, just constantly striking out and unable to hold a career in the majors. I liked because yeah, he's a side character. He's secondary. He's not core to this family, but they give him plenty of attention too. And there's we brought up a Chekhov's gun in an earlier episode that we just recorded, but I love that they set up the baseball bat on the wall and we get to see him use it on an alien later on in the movie. The attention to detail is something I really admire, and I just love this movie. I love the performances, and also we should praise the score by James Newton Howard. Very very prolific composer for films. He did Pretty Woman, he did Fugitive, he did Space Jam, Peter Pan, O5's King Kong, the Dark Knight film, uh, maybe even more than just one Dark Knight film. The Sixth Sense, a legend, a beautiful score in this movie should not go unstated.
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely. It helps set the mood. And like it helps set the emotional core of this movie too. I like what you said about Chekhov's bat. Cause it is more than just Chekhov's bat too, because like the bat is on the wall and they do show that before it is used, but they also have to set up Merle's former baseball past, and so instead of just having it be like the tool that will be used to kill the enemy later on, it's a part of this character, and everything they use in this movie, like the alien is also defeated with water because Graham's daughter Bo has this weird thing where she thinks water tastes weird, and so she leaves like half drunk glasses of water everywhere. that becomes used later on too. That's also part of the way they defeat the alien. And Morgan, Graham's son, has really bad asthma. That also becomes Chekhov's asthma that has to do with the defeat of the alien. The alien tries to poison him with this gas and is unable to because he's having an asthma attack and his lungs are closed. And like these little elements of each character's persona, I guess, kind of come together, and that is a part of the resolution. They're all collectively a part of the resolution. And so each character is developed and given an arc that ends in them being bettered off at the end of this story. You know, it feels like a full, complete story you got. It's not just people in a story, it's characters developing through a conflict together. And I like that. I really like that. And I think that's why this movie is so strong.
Yeah, far. I agree. I know that this movie, when I was, reading up on it and just touching base with like other people and other reviews, I noticed that it doesn't have as positive reviews as I would have thought. It's got decent reviews, like probably a B out of like an A to F scale. But, for me, this is very clearly an A movie. It feels like, I don't know why I'm using A to F scale because I don't do that, but it got average reviews, decent reviews. And I think this is a good movie. And there's a Roger Ebert review of this film where he gave it a perfect score, a 4 out of 4 stars. And he talks about how M. Night Shyamalan is a born filmmaker, how he has expert suspense in this film, how the apprehension it comes out of nowhere, and yet also he kind of leaves nothing to the imagination here. M. Night Shyamalan. He sets everything up. He's not making things up as he goes. Nothing is unearned in this movie. It's all there for you. The relationships are clear. The characters and what they each bring to the table is clear in this situation. The only thing that I suppose you may not see coming is the twist that the glasses of water that the little girl leaves all over the place are a solution at the end. The aliens, when they touch water, they get hurt, they get burned. But even then, right, the solution is present. It's literally laying around the house the entirety of the film. She cannot finish a glass of water and places them all over the house. There's several shots of the family gathered around the television, and the television, the table that the television's on, the coffee table in front of the television is all covered in glasses of water. It's always there. The bat is always on the wall. But it all wraps up in such a fun and, I can't say unexpected way, but certainly a satisfying way. And it's not perfect by any means. The CGI has really aged in a very unflattering way. And I will say M. Night Shyamalan's endings at times can leave something to be desired. The narration that he is prone to doing or prone to having in his films, or the text crawls that he's prone to having, I think leave something to be desired. But there's just something about this movie, something about the profound sense of hope that it gives you after an hour and some change, or maybe 2 hours and some change of real struggle and nihilism and apprehension. I think this is one of his best. I really do. And I don't think many people would argue on that. But I think it's proof that he didn't just lose it after Sixth Sense. I think it's proof that he was and still is capable of making really profound and interesting movies and writing good characters.
Yeah, he's not a one-off director that got lucky once.
And believe me, I've asked myself that question before. We've talked about that before.
Sometimes. Just like the good reverend here, sometimes our faith is tested in M. Night.
It's true, man.
Yeah. Ugh. Okay, can I tell you? I know why people don't like this movie. I know why it's a B in general.
Okay, tell me.
It's because people don't like the water thing.
Yeah.
People don't like that the aliens were defeated by water. it is kind of like a suddenly, oh, it's very convenient, water defeats them way to end them. I think people hyperfixate on that, and I think that's missing the point. It's not really about, oh, they defeated them with water. It's about like each of these characters have banded together to not let tragedy strike a second time.
Yeah.
And that's what's, the focus. I guess it is dumb that water, okay, sure. Why would aliens invade a water planet? I was thinking when I was watching this, though, that if this really did happen, we live in Houston and we would not have to worry about aliens because if they stepped outside, they would dissolve into the air. It's that humid,
Well, but I still think it's smart because so they set it up early on. Again, to quote that Ebert review, or loosely quote that Ebert review, it's not left to the imagination. There's not a lot of disbelief here that I have to suspend. The beginning of the movie, that cornfield is bone dry. Stuff is dying, right? You can tell that there's things are not going well here. It's rural Pennsylvania, right? It's not exactly Seattle. You're not getting rain every week, or maybe even more than a couple times a month at this point. I buy that they would invade and come to this part of the country. I mean, I do. I kind of like it. I kind of like it. And I like what you said about not letting tragedy strike twice. We see that later on in the film when Morgan's asthma is what stops him from inhaling the toxins. I think you kind of talked about that a little earlier. But that's something that reinvigorates Graham's belief in a higher power again, that gives him hope again. So maybe it is supposed to be this like serendipitous occasion, this thing that brings this man back to something that was clearly transformative for him at one point. I don't love when movies throw religious symbolism at you, but I don't think this movie's doing that. I just think it uses Graham's religion and his status or former status as a priest as a way to push the movie's larger message that there is hope even in times of extreme tribulation. So I like the alien ending. I see the issues with it, but I like what it makes me feel at the end of this movie.
Yeah, well, I like that this movie is about, like, this man finding his faith in God and returning to the cloth. But it's not, like, concretely, oh, and then they were saved because God saved them. Like, no, it's not about being black and white. God has saved you. It's more about, like, this character has found a reason to have faith. It's not overtly, you should be religious. It's more about the human condition than religion, I feel like. And I like that a lot.
I agree. I noticed that religion was at the forefront of his latest movie, M. Night Shyamalan. So I'm kind of fascinated by his process and I'm just interested in the themes in his movies. And I'm starting to see a through line, I guess. But overall, I miss this era of Shyamalan. I'm hoping that we get more like it because, as you said, I don't think he's a one-off guy that just got lucky a couple of times. There's clearly a competent director and writer here. I don't know if it's studio stuff that's gotten in the way. I don't know if it's his own failings as a writer, right? Maybe he's rushing. Maybe he's taking too much time. I don't know. All I know is, despite whatever flaws this movie may have, even for those folks that don't like the water thing, I think it's a strong message. I think the performances are really good. Again, shocked you hadn't seen it yet, but happy that you finally did.
Yeah, I am too. I'm also glad to see that in this movie, M. Night Shyamalan has once again pushed the meaning of cameo and has made himself more or less an entire character just in this movie.
Yeah,
he's the.
It's not too bad here.
Yeah, he's friends with Reverend Graham Hess, but he also was the man who accidentally ran his wife over with a truck that fateful night. There's no ill will harbored between these characters, but he is a character and they do have this like relationship. And it is like almost a cameo, but it's too involved and too much of a character to be called a cameo. But whatever.
Yeah, I agree.
That's fine. I don't dislike a director doing that. I don't think this happens often though. Like he's kind of doing his own unique form of cameo.
Yeah, he by far does it more than any other director I've seen.
I'm glad I watched it. I'm
I'm
glad
also
you
glad you
told me
watched.
to. I'm glad you convinced me to. Okay, well,
All right.
thank you for joining me.
Thank you, buddy.
And thank you, everybody, for listening. Goodbye. I'm sure you're looking at the same picture, but look at the rabid animal Mel Gibson has turned
Fuck.
into.
God bless him.
It really is like if a beast was made into the flesh of man and is trying to imitate a
Ugh.
smile, but is not doing a good job at it.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.